Oh, hey there. I'm sorry.
You're fine. Take a breath. You're
Well,
good.
hey there, Christina. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Confident Sober Women podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today and to share you and your story and your work with our audience. So, I'm going to turn the mic over to you and let you share a little bit more about your story, and then we're going to chat.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful. Yeah, so my name's Christina Kimbrough, and I'm the founder of Free Life LLC. I'm 4 years sober from an addiction, and when I got sober, I found that it was isolating. I got sober at the height of the pandemic, February 3rd, 2020. Yeah, crazy time to get sober. Um, but for me, it worked in that first year because all the bars were shut down. So I was a social drinker. Loved going out. So really that first year of sobriety didn't go out anywhere because we couldn't. And then after that, things started to open up, but I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to socialize. Like, I don't know how to go out. I don't know how to be a person in sobriety. And so I started looking for people and I found my amazing co-founder, RJ Zimmerman, and he had reached out on Twitter. We'd gotten coffee, and then he started at a meetup where we're from in Virginia. Hampton Roads, like Virginia Beach area. And our community just ballooned to like over 400 people in two different meetup apps. And we just kept hosting meetups and then it ballooned from there.
Oh, that's incredible. So 4 years, that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering if you could share just a little bit more about like how you got sober, like what did you use a recovery program or like what worked for you, what hasn't worked, and like what's that been like
Yeah.
for the last 4 years?
Yeah, I love that question. I love that you also said what didn't work because sometimes we know there are things that that don't work too. So I always say I made kitchen sink recovery, although I've heard it called as patchwork recovery, where it's like you use a multitude of things. I went originally to AA, because you start Googling at night, am I an alcoholic? Like what's what is going on here? And so I use that. And then I also use intensive outpatient. So I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. And I moved out from Virginia in with my grandma in Cleveland just to get sober. And I thought, oh, if I move, this will make a difference. And it didn't, because your problems follow you if you move.
Wherever
Uh,
you go, there you are.
oh, love that. Yes, shocker. And so I continued to struggle and I was like, okay, I need professional help. I'd been going to counseling, but I was like, I need people that specialize in addiction. And so I did an intensive outpatient for like 8 weeks. If people don't know what that is, it's just group therapy, really. It is group therapy with licensed addiction counselors and really just dug into the things that, were hard for me.
Thanks for sharing that. I love that. And so what you're saying too is it was better for you when you had some support.
Correct.
And I think that's really important. I do talk to some people. I work mostly with women, sometimes with men too, particularly in my private practice. And most of the women, people that I work with have some either addiction history of their own or they're connected to it in some way, they're married to it, they're living with it, they grew up with it, whatever it was. And sometimes people will say, I have one right now that I'm working with that basically just white knuckled her way through
Mm,
2 years. Like she stopped drinking and that's great. Like super proud of you. Like that's great. But like, um, usually it's really tough and you don't like feel very well if you don't add in some other resources. So, um,
100%.
if you can do that, I mean, that didn't work for me. I
Yeah.
couldn't do it by myself for sure. I was very unwell. So I needed a lot of tools.
Yeah.
So I do think that sometimes people can kind of stop on their own, but it's definitely really a lot easier and better and more dynamic when we can layer on a program, recovery of some type, some therapy, some wellness, some
Yeah.
AA, some outpatient, whatever it is. And it sounds like that's what worked for you. So I love that for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're right. So when we do become alcohol free for whatever reason, I'm a sober necessary person, so I definitely didn't have choice in drink. Don't believe that I do. Some people get sober for or go alcohol free for a variety of other reasons, but when we make that decision, it's such a dramatic change. Especially when we live in a society that's obsessed with alcohol. Most people around us are drinking in a lot of ways. Now, there's plenty of people that don't drink. I didn't even know that was true. I didn't know that when I was drinking. But there are some, but most people are drinking a lot of times very heavily. Every party, every interaction. the 1-year-old birthday party, the sporting event. I was offered mimosas at my son's lacrosse
Oh,
practice
geez.
the other day. It wasn't even a game. I'm like, what? Like,
Was it, it was just the practice?
it was
Like,
a practice like these I'm
yeah.
like, it's 9 a.m. Like, what? Like,
Yeah, like, what are we doing?
I was like, no, I'm
Yeah.
good. Like, I mean, cool for you, like,
Yeah.
whatever, but like, okay. So anyway, it's just everywhere. You really can't go anywhere where like it seems anyway where it's not a part of the story. So it can be pretty dramatic. And so what you're saying was is like, oh my gosh, and I want to put words in your mouth. Maybe you can share about it a
Yeah.
little bit more, dive in. But like, oh, what do I do now? Or like, who are my people? Or where do I
Yes.
go? And so navigating that. Say more.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're 100% right. I mean, that was it. Was, I used AA for a time, and then after a year, I was like, well, this served a purpose, but it's no longer suits me, right? But then I was like, and I lost all my friends when I got sober. Like, military spouse, the very heavy drinking culture, right? And so I was like, gosh, I want to go out. I want to party. I want to hang out. I don't have community. And so I didn't see it. So there's that saying, you don't see it, build it, And so we just started hosting small events, yoga, walks, all that kind of thing. And now it's just blossomed into a really big community out here, um, of just people to hang out with, no matter what you want to do. Because the other thing is, I wanted to build a community of friends where, if I wanted to go to a concert where there's drinking, it makes it a lot easier if you have someone that's not drinking with you.
Facts. Yeah.
Or, another one, being real, like I still like to go clubbing. I like to go dance. I like to get dressed up, and have fun. And a
Mm.
lot of what I saw in recovery spaces was go to bed by 9, do yoga in the morning. Don't get me wrong, I actually do both, but I also wanted to go dance and party and live a city life. And I didn't have it. And so now I have girlfriends and guy friends who we do party sober,
Mhm.
and I just wanted to expand the tent and show multiple different ways to live an alcohol free life.
Yeah, that's so cool. So it sounds
Yep.
like for you though, you kind of like had a clean slate.
Yeah.
It sounds like, you lost a lot of your friends, which is sad
Yeah.
though, because that like, I don't know, say more about your experience with that. Like that's painful, right?
Yeah.
Especially when, we sometimes I think we try to insert ourselves and we're like, oh, this is fine. I'll just drink my water or mocktail or whatever. But did you feel like your friends were judging you, or do they just not include you anymore? Or were they really
Yeah.
uncomfortable? Like what went on? Like how did you know?
Yeah.
Like how did those friendships end?
That's a great distinction. I think looking back, I don't know if I should call them friends. They're your party friends, right? So the core friends that I've always had, like my best true ones, were very kind and accepting. But those are also the ones that are busy, that live out of state, that you don't see all the time. So the ones that I was going out with on a constant basis are the ones I lost. And they weren't mean. It kind of just fell off, right? Ghosted me, stopped inviting me to things. Parties were a little more awkward. And so then I was like, didn't have a social life anymore. And, life was coming back on in 2021, things were opening up. And I was like, I don't know where to go. I don't have anything to do. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have anywhere to go without, someone to support me. So, yep.
That must have felt really isolating.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
Mm. How did you deal with those feelings though? Like, cause that's a big deal, especially when new in sobriety. Like you were
Yeah.
early on, and to be
Yeah.
met with like those kind of big emotions when we're
Hmm.
still really unregulated, our nervous systems are still healing. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think learning to lean into the hard, like that's what I learned. I was like, oh my God. To be honest, now reflecting, some cross addiction issues, right? So I did gain like 20 to 30 pounds, just food.
Mhm.
Right. So I was learning. I feel like when you're new in sobriety, you're like a baby, you're getting your feet and you're like figuring it out, and so that first 2 years was hard, absolutely. I mean, and beautiful. Like one of my favorite writers, Glennon Doyle, I think says brutal, like
Right.
brutal and beautiful, like
Yeah.
just a mixture of
Mhm.
like unthawing. And I'm like, okay, I am a human now. Whoa. Like, but I'm not going to use alcohol. So what does that look like? So yeah, some, I don't know if they were addiction, but some unhealthy coping. And then also seeking out other people. And then Free Life was born shortly after.
Right, right. So like very quickly you knew like some part of you, at least at the unconscious level, knew like I need to create my own reality here. I need
Correct.
to build my own friends and community. And like, you weren't totally sure what that was going to be, but you knew you needed new people. And
Yeah.
like you said, like you were a military spouse. So like, that's a lot of like the families that were around you, the activities you were involved in. Maybe you've moved a few times. Like, so like, you had to create your own uh new community, which is what you did. I'm curious about that part, about the military spouse part, and
Yeah.
and even in your marriage, like how did that play out? Like, was your partner supportive of your sobriety? Like, how has that been with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were both drinking at the same time, and so that's kind of what made it a dumpster fire. Like, I would drink and then he would quit, and it was just like a cycle. And so we both knew in January of 2019, I had stayed out all night and he was like, "We need to separate, not legally, but just like I think you need to go get help." And so it was as much for me as for him too. Like we knew we needed time apart. I think, that's hard to hear in a marriage. It's untraditional, but we're military, so God, we've been apart for a year at a time. So for us, it was like it made sense. So anyway, yeah, he was super supportive. He worked on himself and I worked on myself during that time. And he struggled with his own sobriety actually for about a year after, kept drinking in and out. And while I was sober. So, and that was hard. He's now completely sober, but it's been a process.
Hmm. It is a process, and when you are, it's always a process, and it creates different challenges when one person makes a change, whether it's a sobriety or maybe one person wants to focus on losing weight or some
Yeah.
nutrition or fitness goal or something, or a professional goal, but the other person isn't quite on board, and maybe they're still having habits or hangups that are kind of and so there's a tension there.
Yeah.
There's a tension and and also like a trajectory, like one person is moving up and kind of forward in life, and you're kind of waiting for the other person to catch up,
Yeah.
you feel like
Yeah.
you're kind of dragging them along, and
Yep.
that can be a little exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you, and good for him that he like did find that. As I mean, we all know we can't get anybody sober and we can't get anybody drunk,
That's
so
right.
we know we don't have that kind of power. We're not powerful enough to make anyone do anything or not do something. And so, but it takes a lot of intention and patience, right,
Yeah.
to be able to wait, and
Yeah.
hold on. So it's
Yeah.
nice
And
that,
it's,
yeah, you guys
oh,
were
go
able
ahead.
to see that you needed a separation. I mean, that's very mature
Oh,
to be able to be like, wow, we have a problem.
mm,
This is not working, and so let's get the help we need and be mature about it. And that's amazing.
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that because there was a lot of stigma around it, and that's why I share it. Like, because people are like, you separated. I'm like, yeah, I mean, a marriage doesn't mean you're always together. Sometimes that's what you need. Like, we needed it. And he would come visit and we figured it out. I was lucky we don't have kids yet. Like, it was the right time to do
Right.
it. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like, I was able to quit a job. It was like, you know what? This makes sense for us. And we were in counseling, still have been, and it was the best decision for us.
That's amazing.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I do think you should share that often because this is
Yeah.
the realities of life. You know,
Yes.
I mean, people,
Yes.
I think sometimes lots of us kind of gloss over certain problems, or we want to only show the highlight reels, and that's okay. I mean, I get it. Like, not everybody deserves to hear all parts of our story. We don't need to share all the gory details. But when we do share in a general way that we have problems, and that these are the kinds of things that came up, and conceptual things, or like we needed to separate, or this person's dealing with depression or whatever, we get the opportunity to help a lot of other people, because when people
Yeah.
hear those messages, when we're honest and
Yeah.
out and in like kind of these very vulnerable ways, it helps other people. And then they're like, oh my gosh, like I can reach out to her to talk to her about my husband or my
Yes.
sister or whatever's going on. So like when we are out and we are recovering out loud, it's such a big deal because it helps other people. Now, not everybody wants to do that, and that's fair. Like we don't
Yeah.
all have to be out, but that's something that's been really important for me in my journey in the last few years. I mean, I've been kind of around for a long time, and since I kind of grew up in AA, like I that anonymity piece was so important, and I respect it, and I respect that, and it was so important to me, um, that I struggled in this last 5 or 6 years as I was sort of stepping into like a much more public space with the recovery. Now, I was out in my regular life. People knew, like, no shame in that. And then it did help because I had neighbors call me and say, hey, I heard, I know you have, you struggle with alcoholism, like, can you, and ask for help. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, I'm so thrilled. But when I started to become much more public, um, I, it took a long time because I felt like I was betraying, a program that I really felt passionate about, or I was like doing something wrong. But then I realized, like, I'm not saying anything negative about that program. Like, I never say anything negative. I still think it's great. I still refer people there, but I just also needed other things. And like, I also want to be able to serve people in this way. And so when we share things, and even in our marital relationships, especially there, or in our
Yeah.
parenting, it gives people the opportunity to hear that that they're normal,
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and I'm glad you reminded me of that because you're right. I mean, it's 4 years ago, so, I haven't thought about it, but yeah,
Right.
absolutely sharing, marriage struggles to the, extent that you're comfortable with,
Right.
but yeah, I think the separation was good. Like, again, I always say it wasn't legal, it was intentional, and maybe it's a little non-traditional, but it worked for us, right? We didn't need to get away from each other. It was more so I needed space to deal with stuff. You know what I mean? That I had just put off.
Well, it's kind of like why people go to rehab. Like, I'm a
Yeah,
big,
right.
big
That's a
advocate
great
for
point.
inpatient rehab. Like, I'm a big,
Uh-huh.
mostly because it removes you from your environment,
Yes, and that's what I
and
needed.
that's it. And it's not, and I believe that, like, when we get that separation, whether it's from your spouse or just removing you from your environment and putting you in this therapeutic place, you get to just be focused on you, which is
Yes,
really tough if you're also managing your husband or your kids or
right?
your laundry or whatever. And so, yeah, really good for you. Great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
glad you guys
you.
are working through it. And like, way to
Yeah.
go. Now look at him. Now he's
Yeah, and
doing
it's amazing. And you're right. So to touch back on the portion of being a military spouse, like so that's where I didn't even mention it, but that's where my addiction really took off. We were like 25 when I met, I think 24, 25. And I hadn't drank earlier in life. I just grew up in a Christian home, just wasn't part of our world. But when I met him, we were drinking a lot, partying as you do, just young. And in our community, I mean, in general, you meet people, what do you say? Hey, let's get a drink,
Mhm.
and so that's where it's our culture's still there and still inundated with it. So
You're so right. It's everywhere. It's just always everywhere. But one of the best things that's happening in this kind of modern day recovery is the explosion, of the non-alcoholic drink space. And
yeah.
for me, and maybe this is relatable to you, or you've heard stories, or maybe not. For me, I I have one foot in both sides. For NA space, NA drink space, and also not. So like personally, I have never up until recently used any like traditional NA products. That wasn't a part of my life. I wasn't drinking O'Doul's. I wasn't like ordering, whatever fancy mocktails. It just, I didn't want that. For me, it was definitely kind of triggering. And I also didn't see any value in drinking a non-alcoholic beer that wasn't going to give. It's like drinking decaf coffee for me.
Sure.
Like, why would you do that? That seems really wasteful and stupid. So I never did that. That wasn't a part of my life. It wasn't because somebody told me I couldn't or any of that. I just didn't like the way my brain works. And I'll tell you a quick story. So then all of the stuff started coming up, right? All of a sudden it's exploding everywhere. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so cool. And like there's articles about it and there's women-owned businesses and like, yay, okay, fun, fun. And so I'm like, all right, well, how do I feel about this? Right. And I remember, and I think I wrote something on LinkedIn or somewhere about how I live in both spaces. Like I'm thrilled that we have options. I love it for people who don't want to be drink alcohol for whatever reason, whether it's
Yep.
a health condition or you just don't want the calories or you're truly sober necessary like me or whatever the reason. I'm glad there are options because there should always be options for people
Yeah.
who want them because we're all different. So I'm
Right.
thrilled and I love that there's all kinds of different options. And also, I'm not going to use those options, right? So,
Yeah.
like, it was a struggle because I know that a lot of people are very, very much like me, that
Yeah.
they don't want to drink drinks that look like alcoholic drinks.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so it's been interesting in my own journey to watch this unfold literally right now as we're working through it and to see other people doing it. Um,
Yeah.
so I think I might have told you this, but I went to California last year to the NatCon conference. It's this huge conference. It's a mental health conference where I did a TEDx talk, and it was amazing. And I was in LA. You know, I was traveling by myself. I've traveled by myself many times, and it's fine. I don't have to worry about like drinking or not. That's not my problem right now. But I was in LA. It's fancy. You know, I was at this hotel and I went to the down to the bar. I was like, cool, I'm gonna get like a, salad or something. And like, and they had, because it's California, I guess, they had like different drinks on there with like the spirits, non-alcoholic spirits. I was familiar with the brands. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they have like the Lear.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. It's like, you know what? I'm gonna try this. Like this is I'm in California. I want to try it. And she brought it out and she set it down and it was in a glass with a big ice cube and
Yeah.
garnish. And right away, I was like, hmm, that looks like an alcoholic drink.
Yeah.
And immediately for me, like that set off a reaction and a thought pattern that's not something I like
Yeah, for
at
sure.
all. And
Yeah,
so, of course, I drank it because I'm not going to waste.
sure.
But I did really need to share about that the next morning, meet some of my fellows. And I shared about it mostly because I needed to hear myself share about that and also to maybe serve someone else who needed to hear that message that sometimes we wonder if we really are alcoholic or not, or if maybe I could moderate my drinking. And so for me, like that exact situation is how I know that I'm not somebody who can drink alcohol normally.
Yeah.
Like that's not going to work for me. So
Yeah.
so for me that's just how it goes. But I'm
Yeah.
so glad that we have all of this fun stuff to try now. Don't
Yeah,
you
for
think?
sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you share that. I understand. I mean, I don't, yeah, I think it was 3 years into sobriety until I tried my first non-alcoholic anything.
Mhm.
And I did it very intentionally. I actually had a friend with me who was sober, you know what I mean? Just really making sure, because I knew it was something I wanted to try. And I always say that. I think it's smart. Like, if it's not for people, I completely validate and understand that as someone in recovery. I get it. I think that to share the other side of it, they keep me sober. So
Right.
non-alcoholic drinks keep me sober because there's times where I want to drink and or have wanted to drink, and having a non-alcoholic drink available or being able to, like, my dry bottle shop here has kept me sober because I've
Yeah.
been on days where it's nice outside. Summer's always a trigger, right? And I want my beer or whatever it is, being able to go and get a drink, and then I don't even finish the beer sometimes, like, because you forget it's sitting there, but it gets me through that craving and that trigger.
Mhm.
Right. So there's just multiple
Yeah.
ways, and there's no, you're valid, I'm valid. It's just, I think it's cool. I agree with you. I think it's cool that you have options.
Yeah, I think so too. And I love how you described, thank you so much for sharing your experience with it because I
Yeah.
like how you said, you set yourself up for success with it. You
Yes.
did. You had a plan.
Oh, I went very
You weren't like
intentionally.
willy-nilly and, oh, I'm going to go
No.
out. You had a plan. It was
Oh,
thoughtful.
very much
You
so.
knew and respected your alcoholism enough
Yes,
to know, like, I need to have a plan with this. And that to me is like the way it needs to
absolutely.
be done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I try to share that all the time. So with what we do at Free Life, we have a mixture of everyone. Like, we're not a recovery centered group. I am in recovery, so is my co-founder. And that said, I always tell people to, exactly like you said,
Yeah.
plan it, know your triggers. But I knew for me it was something I really wanted to try, right? And I did. And I know there are people that say it's scary, you should never, and I honor that. But for me, it was exciting, and I go out all the time. I network. I don't want to drink water. And so just I wanted to try be part of this group. And I'm so glad I did, because now my life is expanded,
Yeah.
right? That said, it's just being smart, knowing yourself and knowing your triggers. And people ask a lot, because I may have mentioned, but I have a non-alcoholic bar that I run.
Yeah.
And people ask a lot, like, how do you do that? How do you feel about that? I said, well, in recovery, we're responsible for our recovery, right? So it's not, like you said, no one can make us drink. No one, like, I'm responsible for my own triggers. So I honor all the time that maybe we're not the group for people. And I
Right.
honor that. And I understand that. I do.
Right.
but there's also a large swath of us who do actually quite enjoy the drinks, right? And the socializing and all of it. So,
Well, just because they're there, like, and it's personal, but just because they're there, like I'm around people who are drinking constantly.
sure,
We're like, and I guess I'm fortunate, I guess, that it doesn't bother me. Like,
sure.
otherwise, I would really struggle because my immediate
Right.
family are very heavy drinkers and like
Yeah.
we go out all the time. Like, so I'm thankful that like that wasn't a big problem for me ever. And so I, and especially now, I'm like, what the hell? I don't really care. I love club soda with lime is my drink of choice.
Yeah.
But like, and so you don't have to try just because you're there
Right.
doesn't mean you have to drink the non-alcoholic
That's
beverages. Like,
right.
just fair. It doesn't
That's
matter.
right.
But I like what you said, how, this is really big been like became your community. And so
Yeah.
being open-minded to the non-alcoholic drink space, um and being respectful of your recovery created friendships for you,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
helped you build your community, which we all really so desperately need,
Yeah.
recovery or not. Like, as
Yeah.
human beings, we are designed for connection, and so we're literally created for that. And so when we don't have a strong sense of belonging in our lives, then we really do suffer at a variety of levels.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had that experience maybe as a younger person, even while you were drinking, and
Yeah.
then now how that looks, because most people just want to fit somewhere,
Yes.
and I think that's really what you've created, and kind of why you've done it. But this is such an
Yeah.
important part of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting, when you get sober, you reflect on your life as you do, like, why in the world did I end up here? And part of it was I was lonely. It's so funny because so I drank because I was lonely. I mean, many other reasons, but that was a huge one. And it's funny because I'm an extrovert. I've always been surrounded by people. That does not mean you had deep connections, though. Do you know what I mean? That are filling those needs. And so, yeah, I used to drink a lot. I would bond with the bartenders because I didn't know it. Now I know it. But like I was looking for friendship. I was looking for not even just friendship, but like deep conversations. And I'd always have those deep conversations when I was drunk. And so now I'm sober and we foster it. Our one of our taglines or what I say all the time is fostering deep connections without alcohol, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
agree with you. I'm a person that craves that too. Like, and that's one of
yeah.
my struggles, I think, as a kind of an older woman now. Like, most, at least the women in my life, are like, it's not something that's common to to feel like you're with people who really want to dive deep.
Mm,
And I crave that very, very much. And so lately, for sure, in the last whatever 10 years or so, I've been kind of sloughing off like people who aren't really interested in that, and we all have a
yeah.
finite amount of time, and so I don't really want to spend my time over coffee to watch you like smile about everything in life.
Right.
And
Right.
so
That's
it might
exhausting.
it might be rude, but like and so it
No.
hasn't left a lot of people,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because most I feel like women are just, I don't know what it is, if they're like scared of being vulnerable, if it's just not socially acceptable or nobody taught you, but like I crave those deeper connections too. And I'm not saying you always have to air every bit of all of your dirty laundry, but you
Exactly.
can do so in a general way. Like, you can say things like, man, my husband's driving me crazy today,
Of
or I
course.
can't stand my kid, or
Yes.
whatever. Like, we can say some of these things and have it be received and then also hear that from someone else without it
Mhm.
being like all of our deep, dark secrets, right? Not everybody can
Oh, yeah.
receive that. We can't trust everybody with all of our story.
Yep.
But it sounds like what you really wanted was more of that. And
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, just yeah, being able to be honest, right? Like I know, and I think sometimes we feel guilty for how we feel about something or other people, and it's like it doesn't make feelings aren't good or bad. It's what we do with them. So those feelings about like your husband or not yours, but like if we're frustrated with our husband, our kids, our work, like I think we feel bad or guilty talking about it. It's like, no, honestly, it's gonna help you be healthier if you talk about it.
Oh my gosh, I was at a networking meeting this week, an evening. A friend of mine who's also a business owner just randomly was like, "Hey, I'm going to this local networking group. It's like a happy hour thing for this group I joined. You want to go?" And I'm like, "You know what? I can. I'm available." So I went with her, and those things can be kind of
Oh yeah.
interesting. Like, I'm like a pretty, I like to be social, so
Yeah.
usually I'm like very good at talking to people, but it's also awkward sometimes when like you don't know anybody in the room, which I didn't,
Oh
except
yeah.
my friend. And so it was like one of those kind of like, oh, a lot of people did seem to know each other. And I was kind of standing next to her while she was talking to this person. And then I started talking to this woman, and we had the most lovely conversation, which led into somehow, I'm not even sure. Oh, because I shared, what I do. I was like, well, I work, I'm a woman in long-term recovery, and I work with other women who want to build confidence and um, in their in beyond the first initial stages of recovery. And so we started talking, and then she revealed that was like 10 years sober, and I'm like, what? Like, oh my gosh. So then we just started
Amazing.
talking, and then she was, I guess, felt comfortable enough to kind of share in a little bit more vulnerable way some things that were going on in her relationship, not the real personal stuff, but just in a kind of a vulnerable but general way about how she was interacting with in her partnership, and like some of the challenges that were going on. And so, I was able to kind of support her in that. And we had this nice interaction. And now we're friends, like
I
now
love
we're like,
that.
I was like, like we really need to, she's like, I'd love to go to lunch or something. I'm like, yes. So, I mean, this is how it works,
Yeah.
it can be a space that's safe.
Yeah.
And also there can be a deeper connection without airing all of the things. And it's just kind of finding that balance for each person. Right.
Yeah.
But that when you have a community where you feel loved and respected and valued, that's where that kind of stuff gets birthed,
Yeah.
and free life has given you the ability to create that for people through meetups and events, and that's just, I think, just such a missing link, and not just in our community. I mean, I think the recovery
Yeah.
community is a special group of people, and we
Yeah.
have a commonality, right? This is
Correct.
coming together on a common thread, but I really do. I think everybody's craving it,
Oh my gosh, 100%. I just
Yeah.
saw I don't it was like a statistic from like Washington Post or something, but they were saying like 60% of remote workers are really sick of working at home. Like it is nice and they miss people. Right? So like we know, I mean I read a lot and we like there is a loneliness epidemic. And I don't think it's also just I don't think it's that we're missing out just not socializing. I think it's the quality of the relationships that are being had as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that's what we're saying. It's like, how are we connecting? What are we
Yeah.
connecting on? Is it real? Is it,
Yes.
are we getting into the nitty gritty? Are we only smiling and
Yeah.
only sharing the good stuff, the highlight
Right.
reel, or, so there needs to be a good mix of it,
Yeah.
and also just shared interests, like, maybe you're really interested in, um, you mentioned things like hiking, or you like
Yeah.
cycling, or maybe you have a kind of different interests like, handcrafts, or I don't know, something creative, or bird watching, maybe you feel like a little embarrassed about it. Like, well, I
Yeah.
like to watch and study birds. I'm making this up,
I
but
love no, but
and
I
maybe
love that.
like people would be like, I don't want to share that because it's not like a common interest. But I
Right.
bet like there's probably a bazillion people who
A
have your
hundred
interests like
percent.
in the world, maybe not in your local area, but that's the beautiful thing about the internet. And so maybe that's a thing too. People get like a little funny about their interest if it doesn't seem common. And
Yeah.
so when you bring people together and you're out taking a hike, and it gives people the space and the opportunity to say like, yeah, I really love like watching Animal Kingdom. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I on that note, I always say that I would rather I could listen to someone that's passionate talk about a bird. You know what I mean? Like if you love your thing, go hard for your thing. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, I
Yes.
could listen for you, like maybe not for hours, but like it's not my thing. But if you love a thing, don't let anyone make you feel embarrassed that it brings you joy. You know what I mean? Like I we have we have a bird watcher in our community, and while it is not my thing, it is very fun and cool to be with that person and see them light up about, you know what I mean? Like, so anyway, I love empowering and passioning people to live and share who they are authentically.
Yeah,
I
I
love
totally agree with that. And like people's joy around that, like even if it's your work, like maybe
it. Yeah.
maybe it's your profession and you think it's weird or like
Yes.
boring. You're like, oh, we just install fiber optics in the ground. And I'm like,
Right.
what? Like, what
But
do
we
you
don't know what that is.
And I'm
Like,
like, tell me more. Like,
a
what does
hundred
that
percent.
work? And they're like, we do this every day. This is boring. But to the other person, it might, for me, I'm always curious about stuff. And
100%.
I'm like, tell me about this. And they're like, what's wrong with you? But
I think
it is
so.
really interesting to listen to people who are passionate. And again, like, yeah, if it's a bird, I would listen to that. I'd be like, what? Birds
Well,
can do what? You know?
exactly. And I network, not surprisingly, for a living. I meet people, new people all the time. And the people to me that are the most interesting are the ones that love what they do or have like a niche thing about them. Those are the best interactions versus where are you from? What do you do? Like,
I agree with you.
like it's very cool to have something different about you. If you love birds or Harry Potter, or whatever it is, I think
I
it's
think it's
cool.
fun too because a lot of us don't have, like, I feel like I don't have a super big interest in something that's like
No, same.
unique. Like, I like to
Right.
exercise, I love to talk
Sure.
about nutrition and health, and but I don't have like a super unique hobby or something. So I am always intrigued by people
Yeah.
who have something like that or like a unique job. I
Yeah.
definitely love to listen.
And I think you made me think of something. So I love all of this. My background is in communication and I love studying how we speak and how we converse. And so I think a lot of it's just a hypothesis, but where the loneliness comes, I think is a breakdown in our communication skills,
Yes, you're
right?
so right.
And I forget where I read it.
Sure.
I'm bad with numbers, but it was like the listener actually directs a lot of the conversation. So if
Yes.
we're all chronically distracted, I'm gonna read that and I'm not gonna feel the space or I'm gonna shut down and stop. So really actually our listeners, you and it's funny because you wouldn't think that you would think the speaker would be driving the conversation.
Mhm.
It's the listener and how, and then I also tell people too, good, there's active listening. And then there's also asking good follow-up questions. So I'm really good and intentional about knowing how to ask the right questions. Like, that shows that I actually care about what you're saying, you know?
Same. I totally agree with that. And that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why I love doing this podcast so much. It's
Yeah.
such a fun opportunity to like, um, like I hear something someone said and be like, whoa, I need to hear more about this, or I
Yeah.
need to
Go
know how that
deeper
happened.
there or
And the
whatever.
person might even be like, what? That isn't even an important part of my story. But yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with you about the listener. And I think that what happens in our in our interactions in general, whether it's online or even in person or over text or whatever, is we are distracted, but even more like there's people don't have the knowledge, haven't really been taught how to like validate,
Yes.
and also like to listen and hear and validate. So like, someone might say something or text and say like, I'm really struggling right now. Like I feel like I might be a little bit depressed, or I'm really struggling with my marriage, or they might share a thing, and then the reception might just be like uncomfortable, and the
Yes.
person might say something like, well, have you tried doing in some breathing
Mm,
exercises? And you're like,
that's not what I
that's
needed.
not, thank
Yeah.
you.
That's
Like,
an
thanks for sharing
excellent
that.
point.
So I think we
Yeah.
don't, like, it's almost like an uncomfortability with people's feelings, which I think is just a
Yes.
long-standing problem and lack of
Yes.
empathy and connection.
Yeah.
It's a lack of
We could totally do like a part two to all of this because
that.
you're
Yes.
right. Because it's interesting. I've noticed this living in recovery, mental illness and addiction. And I again meet with a lot of people. So you hear a lot of hard stories. And I bring that up to say is that yes, we are very uncomfortable, not you and I, but like as a society, we don't really know how to hold space for people that are struggling, have struggled, or just sharing hard truths. I remember I share this a lot. It's a big part of my story is the mental health side, but I went to the psych ward twice for mental health. And I got out, and it was for ideation, suicidal ideation. And when I got out, I was met with a lot of like weird stares,
Mhm.
awkward pauses, like people just didn't know what to say. And so that's really where the genesis of me sharing started because I was like, the most impactful were the people that were just like, wow, that's hard. I'm here. Let me know what you know what I mean? Like we just didn't know how to talk about it. And we don't know how, so we don't have to fix people. Sometimes we just need to see people.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thanks for sharing that. And also one of the things that's so great about what you're doing, like when we create communities like that and or spaces that are social and or activity based, when we put that on the calendar, when we create events or things for people to come together, then you're automatically creating the opportunity for some of that to go on, for us
Yeah.
to practice that. So
Yes.
if we don't have free life, and if we don't have meetups or AA meetings or whatever,
Yeah.
or I have an event that's next month, that's June
Yeah.
18th, where I just have alcohol free party. Like my one friend was
Love.
asking, she's like, what are you going to be doing there? Like, are you having like a workshop? I'm like, it's literally just a party with the
Yeah.
same thing. And I was like,
That's all you need.
and if we don't create those, maybe it's a gym class or
Yeah.
whatever, like then you don't have the opportunity to practice listening to someone's real life,
Yes.
receiving it, and then being able to offer back, reflect back,
Yeah.
offer empathy, just be a good listener. So that's why these things are so important, you know.
Yeah. Completely agree. I'm glad
I
you're
think
doing
people
that.
underestimate it, and we think, oh, it's just
Oh,
whatever. Like we don't need social events in our life. We're so busy or whatever. I'm like, well, I mean,
no, we
we need
do.
them because we need to come into connection with other human beings at that human level to practice the skills of communication, to practice the act of listening,
Yeah.
and get better at it. So
Yeah.
it happens.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing every time. I mean, I'm busy a lot and I'm tired in a good way, but after every event, almost every event we leave and we're all like, that was amazing.
Yeah,
Like,
that's very cool.
humans are just incredible. We're messy and complicated. And honestly, the good shit still holds. Like, we did a bonfire last night and just sitting around talking, and I,
Yeah,
there's
so cool.
magic in it. It's cool.
Yeah, Christina, I'm so excited that you're a
Oh,
part of our
thank you.
community today, and I really appreciate your time. And this has been an incredible conversation. Obviously, we do have more to talk about. So, where do you like people to reach out and connect with you if they want
Yeah. Yeah. Instagram's one of the best ways, Free Life LLC.
to? Okay, cool. I'll make sure I link all that to the in the show notes below. And
Thank
just again,
you.
thank you for your time and for your
Yes.
work. It's so powerful, and I hope we can meet in real life soon. You're not that far away from me.
Yes, that's right. Thank you
Keep it
so
up.
much.
You're welcome.